So my name is Daishi, and I am an assistant teacher at the Village Zendo, and I'm speaking to you this evening from the Croft School Zendo, fourth grade classroom. And per usual, it's really nice to see many old and familiar faces, and also quite a few new faces to me. So what I'd like to talk to you this evening about is talking, a talk on talking, about how beautiful and difficult it can be to say a few words, and how Zen practice and our community, you, uh, can be great sources of encouragement and inspiration. I think that Zen, rightfully so, gets a reputation for its appreciation of silence. But I think if we look a bit deeper, we can also see how it influences and guides our speech. It's one of Zen's many paradoxes that it is a tradition based in the words of Bodhidharma, who called Zen a special transmission outside the scriptures with no dependency on words and letters. And yet these were words, and the lineage has left a vast wake of talkers, of talks, teachings, commentaries, stories, and poems. And I think if we look at what we do now at the Village Zendo and its affiliates, as a community of practice, I think we honor and endeavor to resolve this tension between silence and speech, and between the importance and the futility of words and letters. So on the one hand, the Village Zendo, in its bones, encourages full and authentic expression. The teachers, teachings, and practices encourage us to live our life wholeheartedly and authentically. The Japanese name for our temple, Daitokuji, can be translated as true expression. And speaking freely is one form of expression that we hold up and value. And we've developed and preserved many different forms that encourage us to talk and to skillfully use and consider the written and spoken word. So we have open zazen. For those who might be unfamiliar to this particular practice, it often occurs at the end of a period of intensive practice, maybe a session or a zazen kai, and everyone has a chance to reflect on their experience. We have classes and workshops where a group comes together around a topic of interest, maybe poetry, Zen liturgy, and among many other activities, we talk about thoughts and feelings that arise from encountering that topic. We have Daisan and Dokusan, this intimate one-to-one container for students to explore their practice with a teacher. we also at the Village Zendo have the metaphorical water cooler. And I haven't been to the Zendo in some time, but over the years, I've always appreciated how this kind of beautiful practice of before a formal activity or after a formal activity, this self-selecting group will kind of come together and linger together to talk, to simply talk. And of course, we have the precepts, which hold all of our practices, but also speak directly to speech, like the fourth precept of not lying, or the sixth of not discussing the faults of others. And really, all of the precepts in some way are tied implicitly to how we speak to ourselves and others. And we have Dharma talks, which I think are really intended to encourage, to inspire, and perhaps provoke continuous practice. And yet, on the other side of these encouraging forms are their boundaries, their limits and constraints that make them what they are and not something else. So the boundary of the fourth precept, not lying, might be don't tell a lie. Or it might be to reflect on when and what we lie about, which puts some constructive awareness between the lie and the self that feels some kind of compulsion to do so. Sessions are conducted in noble silence, and so we're expected not to talk except during specific times and in specific ways to preserve this precious opportunity for solitude amidst togetherness. During open sozan, we're asked to speak from the heart. And so we must consider on some level what that means for us. And in Dokusan, I've always found this intimacy of the form of sitting knee to knee with your teacher, not knowing when you might see them again, aware of the line outside the door of other students waiting their turn, has always created, again, for me, a sense of urgency. Like the form is kind of respectfully asking me to get to the point, to get clear through encounter after encounter on what is important in this moment to express. And I would say that even our water cooler practice has a form and therefore a boundary to it. Like it might be weird or out of place if in the midst of casual conversation, one kind of lowered their gaze and settled onto the floor and into zazen. And so, very skillfully, our practices are shaping through their very forms our relationship to talking. But this skillfulness does not mean it's always easy or pleasant. In fact, again, for me, saying a few words, depending on the landscape, the internal and external landscape, can be incredibly difficult. How do you explain in a few words a bad diagnosis to a friend, or war, or racism, or violent crime to a child? What can we say when we are white hot with anger, or shaking with fright, or just deeply confused? Sometimes just authentically responding to the deceivingly simple question of how are you is a bit of a journey. If you really want to pass this barrier, you should feel as though you have a hot iron ball in your throat that you can neither swallow nor spit up. You really want to pass this barrier, you should feel as though you have a hot iron ball in your throat that you can neither swallow nor spit up. This quote from Muman Ikai, a 13th century Chinese Zen master, speaks to the intensity that can arise when confronted with an inescapable challenge to express oneself. He is talking about the sense of confrontation that can occur with a traditional Zen koan, but for me, his words resonate so deeply with my experience both in and outside of the Zendo when I am out to say a few. In fact, the impetus for this talk was how much difficulty I was having giving Dharma talks. For me, Dharma talks are really on the edge of practice for me. I don't know who I will be tomorrow, but generally speaking, I am not a big talker, and it has been a lifelong challenge for me to find the right words. And my inclination is to just not say a lot. So both professionally and dharmically, when asked to give a talk, it's a thing for me. I want to have something to say, but a lot of the time there is just not a lot there, and or it's very confused. And there really have been several Dharma talks over the past year that have caused me great distress, like this iron ball in the throat, that kind of distress, uh, insomnia, uh, pretty intense irritation at myself and those around me, and sometimes for many days or even weeks. The first time this happened, I thought maybe it's just this one time. And then the second time it happened, I pinned it to the subject matter, which I was kind of wrestling which was kind of both politically and personally sensitive. But when it happened again, preparing for a talk that did not feel controversial, and I still got caught up in this swarm of unpleasantness, I felt like I was just very much getting stuck in this sticky web. So what to do? Spit the iron ball out. No more talks. I'm not giving talks anymore. Swallow it. Just soldier on. Both feel and felt like an impossibility. And my son came home the other day from school with very Zen advice. He said, Dad, if you can't get over it, go through it. And I thought this is a beautiful example of both the power and the futility of words. Because he's right, of course. It's a wonderful map. It's a great menu for what sounds like a delicious meal. It's a helpful pointer, but how? What is go through it? Well, here I am offering this talk. That is my response right now. And in preparing for the talk, I remembered a workshop that I developed with a really dear friend of mine, a brilliant artist and community leader by the name of Stephen Brackett, over 20 years ago, that we called Finding Your Voice, Losing Your Voice. And for several summers, Stefan and I would work together at a program called Face to Face, Faith to Faith, that brought a cohort of young people from different conflict and post-conflict regions in the world for this interfaith and leadership journey. And the workshop was intended to explore how different environments, subtly and not so subtly, impact our voice. And we would give several writing prompts and then ask the participants to kind of free write while playing. So we'd offer a prompt where they'd free write, and then we'd play different music from hip hop to classical. Then we'd play those musics at different volumes. We would have them write in different environments, sitting alone at a desk, sitting in a subway car, going into New York City, alone in the forest surrounding camp. We're sitting side by side with a friend, kind of making obvious and salient what is always, but sometimes subtle, that everything is changing and impacting our expression. Then once we had a piece of writing that the participants felt good about, we would experiment with presenting it in different environments to see how that felt. It could be to recite it alone to oneself, oddly to a tree, to one other person who was paying attention, or to one other person doing something else, to a group, standing on a stage with a microphone, without a microphone, lying down, standing up. And these controlled kind of experiments gave us a chance to see where and how our voice changed and adapted to various environments, and how our environment impacted our confidence and our clarity. And it was really an exercise just in exploring how internal and external environments influence our voice, to gain some insights into the terrain that we felt supported us and those that challenged us. And for me, this terrain, still fairly new, of speaking with you, but at the same time, just staring at a computer screen, is both an almost magical way to be connected, but is very disorienting. And so I turned toward another form we have for talking and connecting. I turned to you, to our Sangha, for support. And I set up several dokasans with our senior teachers to share my experience and to hear their reflections. And it was wonderful. The reflections I got back were very diverse and creative and compassionate. One teacher laughed and said, "Yeah, giving talks is kind of a nightmare. And it's hard to believe that anything I have to say will be helpful to others. But it's important to share one's experience." And then you get to the diving board and you jump. Another teacher and I discussed the different ways trusting oneself can look. How sometimes the voice of compassion may sound like a very gentle affirmation. But in other situations, when the competing voices of self-doubt are so strong One might need more force. Like, hey, you all need to get the fuck out of here. And how important it is to feel, to experience connection to what is genuinely arising and how that connection drives what is expressed. How, when the connection to the topic or to oneself or to those in the room is thick, then the teeny weeny individualized definitions of each word are almost secondary or in service to the connection being expressed through them and in so many other ways that are nonverbal. Another teacher said, think about the talk a lot and then go up there not knowing what you're going to talk about. To work on your talk by walking in the park, not only at the desk. I really appreciated the reflection of another teacher that a Dharma talk is not a TED talk. It's not about being funny or smart or clever or entertaining or emotional. So what is it about? I asked. What talk does our Zen practice fundamentally ask of us? And here's one teacher's response, which I will leave you with this evening. It really doesn't matter what you say. You just need to be yourself, and you are always yourself.